Welcome back to BBC News. Let's turn to our main headlines here. The UN Palestinian ambassador calls for an emergency meeting of the Security Council as international condemnation grows over Israel's plan to take over control of Gaza City. Germany halts exports of military equipment to Israel indefinitely. The European Union president urges Benjamin Netanyahu to reconsider. Our other headlines: newly released evidence in Australia's mushroom case reveals triple murderer Erin Patterson allegedly poisoned her husband 3 times in the years before the fatal lunch. And the independent MP Rupert Lowe has admitted mistaking a team of charity rowers for a boatload of illegal migrants. Let's return straight away to our main story. There's been more condemnation of Israel and overseas of the government's decision to approve a plan for a military takeover of Gaza City. The Israeli opposition leader said Benjamin Netanyahu's plan would cost the lives of hostages and soldiers. Germany has halted military exports to Israel that could be used in the territory. Well, after nearly 2 years of war, Israeli forces already control around 75% of the Gaza Strip, highlighted here in the red. Israel's Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, has been under intense international pressure to agree a ceasefire deal. Well, let's get more on Germany's response to what we've heard from the Israeli government over the last 24 hours. Our correspondent Bethany Bell reports now from Munich.
Germany is one of Israel's staunchest allies. Berlin's strong diplomatic support for Israel is often described as a matter of historic responsibility because of the Holocaust. And after the United States, Germany is the second biggest exporter of arms to Israel. So today's decision is a big deal. Chancellor Merz said Germany's top priorities were the release of the Israeli hostages and negotiations for a ceasefire. But he said Israel's plans for tougher military action in the Gaza Strip made that hard. So he said he was stopping the export of arms that could be used in the Gaza Strip, and he said he was deeply concerned about the suffering of the civilian population in Gaza. He said Israel had to do everything it could to allow in more aid.
Well, that was Bethany Bell. Let's speak live to the former UK National Security Advisor, Lord Ricketts, and thank you so much for joining us here on today's programme. Your reaction to what we heard out of Israel on that Security Cabinet meeting overnight?
Well, I think it's disastrous because another military operation after so many in Gaza against one of the most populated territories in the world, Gaza City, can only lead to more killing, more suffering, more displacement of people who've already been shunted around Gaza many times in the last 22 months. And it doesn't bring us any nearer to a settlement of this crisis. The Israelis have been trying for 22 months to destroy Hamas. They now claim that Hamas is so strong still that it controls the distribution of aid, that they must widen the conflict. I'm afraid hostages have been released at times of ceasefire, and we all want to see those hostages out, of course, but more military action does not seem to me to make that likely. Or is there any sign of a plan from the Netanyahu government on what happens when the fighting finally does die down? This seems to be a recipe for endless occupation and conflict in Gaza.
What should the UK and other governments do? Because certainly from Keir Starmer, we've had another statement of condemnation to go with the many statements of condemnation that have actually preceded it. So what should be done at this stage, do you think?
Britain has, of course, already taken the step that Germany has just taken of suspending most arms sales to Israel. Honestly, I don't think there's any step that Keir Starmer or other European governments can take that will have the slightest effect on Netanyahu's decision-making. I think he's operating entirely with reference to his own domestic position, keeping his cabinet together in Israel, and he's decided that this step is the best chance of doing that. So I think what Britain has to do is to keep doing what we've been doing for months, which is to do everything we can to help the humanitarian effort, to try to ensure that that's not further set back by this new military operation, to stake out.
But everything that we've said so far has made no difference, whether it's the humanitarian effort or anything else. You said in that earlier answer that most of those contracts have been suspended, but not all. And critics of this government continue to return to that point that all contracts should be suspended. There's also that simple question. All of these major decisions now are being made by one man, Benjamin Netanyahu. Why isn't the British government sanctioning him?
Well, because the key thing to do is to try to continue to both exercise influence over the Israeli government if we can, but also to stake out a position of principle to the rest of the Israeli opinion. Well, what we can do, I think, is be clear on what we stand for. That is recognition of the Palestinian state. That is preparation for what happens after this conflict.
Sure, I suppose what I'm asking you is what happens if you're continually ignored? You can't keep doing the same thing, surely.
Well, in the end, it is for the Israeli people to decide the policy of their government. And the Netanyahu government is very unpopular. And there are many, many people in Israel who would agree with what Keir Starmer and other Europeans are saying. Yes, there are probably further incremental steps the government could take. We could cut off all our arms supplies. At the moment, a very small part of Israel's arms purchases. There are some spare parts for the F-35 fighters that I think are still being put into a global pool. We could cut that off. Yes, we could put individual sanctions on Netanyahu. Frankly, Matthew, that wouldn't none of it make the slightest difference. And we do, in the end, need to keep some kind of a line open to the Israeli government because we need to prepare for what comes after this. So I think it's right that we do the humanitarian effort as a priority. It's right we continue to prepare for what happens after a ceasefire. Bear in mind that the Netanyahu government are now saying rather airily that one day the time will come for us to end this war and to hand on Gaza to another Arab state to take control of it. Well, I mean, that's a fantasy.
Yes, it's a non-starter, but in a sense, every avenue you've taken us down in this interview comes to a dead end, doesn't it? And that is the place we're at the moment. How do you break that deadlock?
Well, it's not a dead end because at the end of the day, there will be something following the Netanyahu government. We do need to be preparing for that. It's up to the Israeli government, Israeli people to decide when that happens, but there do needs to be plans for that period. In the meantime, we've got to keep doing everything we can to help the humanitarian crisis in Gaza. Honestly, I don't think there's anything else we can do. Yes, it's frustrating. Yes, it would be great to have further influence over Israel. The only country that might have some influence over Israel is the US. I mean, they don't seem to have much either at the moment, and they seem to be tolerating what Netanyahu is doing.
Yes.
So one thing we can usefully be doing is for David Lammy to be talking, as he is, to the Vice President at Chevening this evening and making very clear where Britain stands on this and why the Americans need to get into this and put their weight behind getting to a ceasefire.
A really brief final thought, if you would, because the British government has already said in terms of recognition of Palestine as a state, that will come in September. Does it not make sense, given where we are now and what the Israelis have announced, that actually one of the things that the UK government could do now is make a decision now on that, not wait with recess for a few more weeks, given the urgency of the situation on the ground? Why not have a decision now?
Well, they seem to have taken a decision in principle, and they want to move with the French at UN General Assembly in New York with all the world leaders assembled there. That seems to me not a bad place to do it. Again, it's not going to make an instantaneous impact, but Britain and France, two historic European countries with real roots in the Middle East, taking that step together, I think it's best done at New York. It's clear that's where we're going because the principles, the conditions that Keir Starmer set out are not going to be fulfilled by Israel. So, whether it's done today or in a few weeks' time, I don't think makes much difference. The key thing is we should stake out our position of principle. This is what we believe is the long-term solution. Two states living in peace together. It's a long way away now, but that's where it's got to land up.
Lord Ricketts, thank you so much for joining us, giving us those thoughts, that analysis. Thanks so much for your time. Now let's stay with this because Dr. Hannes Elias is a doctor specialising in neurorehabilitation and pain medicine who is currently in Gaza City. Now, he has been speaking to my colleague Mark Lowen when explosions suddenly were heard all around him. Let's play a little of that moment.
The situation all over Gaza Strip is so catastrophic, it's beyond description. You speak about 2.3 million individuals are living with complete uncertainty about the coming hour, the upcoming day, and the upcoming months to live. This one thing. Oh my God, oh my God, oh my, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, that's a loud explosion. So this is the sort of life that we are enduring here in Gaza City and all over Gaza Strip. It's bombing, it's non-stop bombing from air, land, and sea. And Where
did that one hit?
casualties. I don't know, but it's within Gaza City here, somewhere in Gaza City here. But it was so loud, it even the hospital shake a little bit. Yeah. So this is situation that we're living. The patients cannot take and play an active role in exercise or rehabilitation program. Why? Because they are so tired, they're so hungry, and even if we provide them with small meal, one meal a day, but they are also worried about the rest of their family because the whole family haven't eaten in 1 day, 2 days. Yes, there are some food, very little number of trucks coming into Gaza, maybe 20, 30, sometimes 70, but most of them are being, as we see in some of the news, I cannot confirm or deny this, but we have seen so many reports that most of these trucks are being robbed even by hungry Palestinians or by gangs who steal it and sell it for 50 times or 100 times its original price. And seldom that you'll find people in Gaza Strip who are able to buy these things because they don't have cash and they don't have this money because there is no work here in Gaza for the past 2 years.
Well, one doctor talking a little earlier to the BBC from Gaza. Around the world and across the UK, you're watching BBC News. Welcome back to BBC News. In just a moment or two, BBC Verify has been looking in detail at the Israeli plan that was announced yesterday, so we'll come to that in a moment. But let's get a little more about the dire humanitarian situation on the ground in Gaza, what people are facing every single day. We've been speaking to Asil Gaben, a freelance journalist who is currently living in Gaza City.
It's so dangerous for me and alarming. And actually, I'm living in fear for my family, for my beloved people here. But leaving my house, leaving my life is not that easy for me. So when you leave your house, you go to unknown destination. So you have to build a new life in tents. You have to collect things in order to facilitate your daily life. You will be living in a new life that you are not accustomed to. The Gaza Strip and the people in the Gaza Strip are, after about 20 months of the war, they are starving to death. They have no money to live. Even if they can get and cross the Rafah border, they don't even have the money to ride a bicycle or to ride a car. It's not that easy to leave leave the Gaza Strip, even if it's dangerous. I know some people who are, let's say, who are so fragile and feel afraid of anything, but they insisted to live in their houses. Despite that, the situation was so dangerous, despite that the bombardment was above their houses, and some people survived some attacks on their homes, and some people were killed. But actually, they know that the humiliation they will be living and experiencing after leaving their houses is not that easy. There is something, humiliation is not an easy word to recognize, because you know what does humiliation for Gaza people means? it means that you have to buy things to live another life. You have to buy food for your family. You have to take care for your elderly people. You have to take care for your children. You have to take care for your infants. So the formula, the milk, the food, the flour, everything in life is not easy to get. So it's not also easy to leave the house. So some people here I know, they said that we want to die in our houses in dignity rather than to leave and live in humiliating life.
Well, let's take, as I was saying, a look at what the Israelis have announced, because BBC Verify has been looking at what the plan might mean for Palestinians who are forced to leave Gaza City. Riha Kansara has more.
Gaza City is one of the few places in the Gaza Strip that has not yet been designated by the IDF as a dangerous combat zone. Around 1 million people are thought to be living there, many of whom have fled from other areas and are now facing fresh evacuation orders as Israel plans to take control of the city for the first time during the conflict. Details are still emerging of Israel's new plans, but reports in local media suggest the military will first order evacuations before moving in. Now, this aerial view of Gaza City from October 2023 gives you a sense of how densely populated it was and how drastically it's changed. And today, an even starker image of the destruction. Blocks completely flattened, signs of mass clearance, and tent and refugee camps dominate the coastline. As you can see here, Gaza City is surrounded by land that has already been under the IDF's control or subject to an evacuation order. Israel says civilians should move to areas outside of combat zones, but those areas are far and few, restricted to just these regions. Any evacuation order issued to Gaza City are expected to drive people southwards to this coastal area of Al-Mawasi. It's also unclear what route Palestinians will take to get there. And any path from Gaza City will need to cross the so-called Netzarim corridor, a strip of land controlled by the IDF that cuts across Gaza, separating the north from the south. Now, according to the UN, tens of thousands of displaced Palestinians are already sheltering in Al-Mawasi. But the area, which is just 14 kilometers long and 1 kilometer wide, is severely overcrowded and facing a shortage of aid and supplies. Now, one man in Gaza City has told us that people no longer have the ability to move from one place to another, and that some Palestinians have been forcefully displaced more than 30 times. Israel says more military pressure will destroy Hamas, but many fear the escalation will endanger the lives of 20 living Israeli hostages. Its plans have also been widely criticized by world leaders who have said any further escalation will worsen the humanitarian crisis in Gaza. The UN's human rights chief Volker Turk says it will result in more massive forced displacement, more killing, more unbearable suffering, senseless destruction and atrocity crimes.
Well, that's the latest on Gaza. Do stay with us here. In 10 minutes' time, we'll get the latest from Jerusalem. We'll get the latest from Washington. We'll also hear from Lise Doucet, our chief international correspondent, because we've reached another pivotal moment in the war there in Gaza. So all the very latest. We'll also play you an interview with an American doctor just back, talking about the levels of starvation. Head to the BBC Live page. There is constant updated coverage of the situation with the latest from our teams around the world, especially there in Gaza. You're watching BBC News. Now,
if you want to know the history of your town, this is where you come. Because quite literally, the history is written in granite and stone. Right back in the day when the cemetery first opened, the interest was phenomenal. People would actually come and promenade like they would in Brighton, up and down here on a Sunday in the best. Families would come and picnic and they'd come and see the latest monuments. Because these were the people that they knew, the great and the good, the wool barons of Bradford, that were dying and then representing their wealth in death.
Bradford looks beautiful today, but would we be able to see this far back in Victorian times?
How times change, eh? Back then, you'd have been looking over a sea of dark satanic mills, chimneys spewing out smoke, the smog settling. It would have been a completely, utterly different landscape to what you could possibly imagine now. And of course, on top of that, you would have the living conditions of the workers living in abject poverty, living in small back-to-backs. And these cottages, they lack sanitation, they lack ventilation, the conditions were absolutely dire, which promoted things like typhoid, scarlet fever, all these different diseases.
So Mark's told me he's managed to track down one of my ancestors who is buried somewhere in this cemetery. It's interesting how, like, as you go further up from near the promenade, really, really rich graves, and down here it's a lot more overgrown and it's all kind of crumbling. But, you know, shows that clearly my family went from a lot of money.
Right, Alex, so from the information you've given me, I've managed to find one grave, and it relates to the one that James Cahill paid for.
Yeah.
For the burial of Elizabeth Celia. And that was on the 21st of December, 1889.
1889.
Right, so it's an absolute wilderness. There are very few gravestones. See, this is Q section. This is where she is.
Is this the really poor section?
Right, look. We've got another number here.
Q441, which means that hopefully 442 is somewhere around here.
You're quite literally there. It's there.
This side?
There. Yeah, that's it. Right. That is it.
Wow.
No marker.
That's kind of sad that there's no gravestone. But I feel more connected to, like, you know, my family from, you know, the 1800s. I just wish there was something more permanent as a marker there.
The Travel Show, your essential guide wherever you're heading. Every weekend on BBC News.
The BBC was always on in the Mashiri house, and my dream actually was to be a BBC News presenter. I want to be for others what the BBC was for us, a trusted source of stability and hope. For me, trust is about presence, about fostering relationships all around the world over years. So when a story breaks, we're not chasing a lead, we're already there. I'm Marianne Mashiri on The World Today for BBC News.
Live from London, this is BBC News. International condemnation grows after Israel's Security Cabinet approves a plan to take control of Gaza City. Germany is to halt exports of military equipment to Israel. The UK government says the Israeli plan will lead to more bloodshed.
I am concerned about what is developing in Gaza at this time.
We will get the latest from our correspondents in Jerusalem and in Westminster, as well as analysis from our chief international correspondent, Lise Doucet. Our other main headlines: President Trump's deadline for Russia to agree to a ceasefire in Ukraine expires today before a possible meeting with Vladimir Putin. And the former Reform MP Rupert Lowe mistakes rowers raising money for charity for a boatload of illegal migrants. Hello and welcome to Verified Live, and we start with widespread international condemnation after Israel's decision to escalate the war with Hamas with a plan for the military to take over Gaza City. Germany has said Berlin will halt the export of weapons that could be used in Gaza. The UK Prime Minister called Israel's decision wrong. China called for an immediate ceasefire. Well, in Israel, the group representing hostage families described Benjamin Netanyahu's move as a colossal catastrophe which only endangers further those still held in Gaza's tunnels. I'm going to show you this map which shows in red areas of Gaza currently controlled by the Israeli military, which it says is roughly 3/4 of the entirety of the Gaza Strip. Last night, Israel's Security Cabinet agreed to those plans to take over everything else, including Gaza City, where hundreds of thousands of Palestinians still live. Emir Nader has this report from Jerusalem.
What's left of Gaza City? Half of Gaza's Palestinians live here, many displaced from elsewhere throughout the war. This morning, picking over the wreckage of the latest Israeli airstrike. But now, by land, all 1 million here will be forced out, pushed south by Israel's military. Prime Minister Netanyahu's plan is a significant step towards every last corner of the Gaza Strip coming under Israeli control, a total military occupation.
In order to assure our security, remove Hamas there, enable the population to be free of Gaza, and to pass it to civilian governance. That is not Hamas and not anyone advocating the destruction of Israel.
In Israel, there's been a strong reaction, where the majority of Israelis want the war to end. Opposition leaders and hostage families are calling it a death sentence for the 50 Israelis who remain in captivity in Gaza, 20 of whom are believed to still be alive.
You failed. My Matan is still there, instead of doing the one thing that this government hasn't done, putting a comprehensive deal on the table that will bring all 50 of them home together.
The concerns of the hostage families are shared by Israel's military leadership in a dispute that erupted into public. The army's chief of staff reportedly telling Mr. Netanyahu that taking over Gaza City will be a trap for the army and endanger the hostages. Prime Minister Netanyahu's plan also further isolates Israel internationally, including among some of its allies. Here, the UK's Prime Minister Keir Starmer calling the decision wrong, that it will only bring more bloodshed. Now, after 22 months of war, Gaza's civilians once again face a new wave of displacement and death, and the vanishing prospect of a ceasefire deal that could ease their suffering.
Netanyahu's decision to occupy Gaza. There's nothing left to occupy. We're already dying. 100,000 deaths every day. Practically all of Gaza has been squeezed into the western part of Gaza City. At this point, for the people, there's no difference anymore whether he occupies it or not.
Israel has today once again widened the horizons of its war in Gaza, with a move that could have untold ramifications for Palestinians and hostages. Emir Nada, BBC News, Jerusalem.
Well, in just a moment, we'll have the latest from Jerusalem and also the latest from Westminster. First, though, let's get more analysis from our chief international correspondent, Lise Doucet, who's here in the studio with me. And Lise, this is a significant escalation, isn't it? Another really critical moment.
Yes, it's measured too by that Security Cabinet meeting, which went on for 10 hours. Every time, Matthew, as you know, during these 22 months of war, when a critical decision about the next direction for the military operation is to take place, a cabinet meeting goes on long into the night. And so it did. It's absolutely stunning to hear this morning, to read the accounts in Israeli media of that cabinet meeting with the very, very heated exchange between the army chief, who was personally selected by Prime Minister Netanyahu, pushing back, he said, against a plan that the army simply could not carry out, which is why what seems to have emerged is not the plan that Prime Minister Netanyahu spoke about to Fox Television in an interview just before that meeting started, which seemed to talk about a full-scale occupation, but the plan which emerged only talks about Gaza City, which, to remind our viewers, about 1 million Palestinians live there. But the general view is that this is just the beginning, and that Prime Minister Netanyahu, flying in the face of the opposition of his current military commanders, former military commanders and spy chief, the polls in Israel which underline that more and more Israelis want to end this war, the hostage families, and it is staggering to see the roll call, one country after another, strong allies of Israel, including Germany, saying, don't do it.
Well, we'll be in Westminster in a moment to see where the UK's current position is. But it is interesting because within Israel, Yair Lapid from the opposition has described the decision as a disaster that will lead to further disasters. In the statement, the 5-point plan, Benjamin Netanyahu talks towards the end of ultimately Arab states taking over. But that is a non-starter, isn't it?
Yes, I have to say that people have found that the comments by Prime Minister Netanyahu rather curious because it seemed to be a hodgepodge of different things. He talked about Arab forces, but that would mean Jordanians, possibly Egyptians, maybe from the Gulf states, but they've made it absolutely clear for many, many months that they will not be part of any operations in Gaza if the Palestinians are not in charge and if Israeli troops are still there. And in fact, they have emphasized repeatedly to Israel, they've come up with their own plans to say the only way to defeat Hamas is by providing an alternative, which is a Palestinian leadership in a Palestinian state. So for suddenly Prime Minister Netanyahu to mention Arab forces, they've denounced it. Jordan in particular has come out and said, we will not take part in this, in your mess in Gaza. Then he mentioned a civilian Palestinian leadership, which is not Hamas, and which is not the Palestinian Authority. Now, he's made that clear many times before, but he's drawn a red line under that. But where would that come from?
Yes, there are only questions that flow out
questions,
of
more questions
statements
than answers. And
yes.
Is that a fig leaf for what the critics say he really wants to do, which is basically expel all the Palestinians, which is what his far right-wing ministers want to do, move in Jewish settlers and end the Palestinian part of Gaza forever?
Lisa, as you were giving me that answer, we are hearing that Israel's Prime Minister's office has said that Benjamin Netanyahu has spoken with the German Chancellor and expressed his disappointment with Berlin's decision to suspend weapons exports to Israel. Aside, though, from whatever the Europeans decide, perhaps the only man that can perhaps deflect and change what Benjamin Netanyahu does is Donald Trump. Where is he, the US president, on this?
Yes, and it's significant that the statement by the 600, just taking that number, 600 former Israeli army chiefs and spy chiefs, when they made their statement a few days ago, it was in the form of a letter to President Donald Trump, because they recognize that the only one who could possibly stop Prime Minister Netanyahu, since he's flying in the face of Israeli opposition, mounting Israeli opposition, is President Trump. President Trump has given conflicting, different statements in fact, over recent months. But his latest comments are that, well, Israel decides what is best for Israel, almost washing his hands of it and saying, I'm not going to get involved. This is not for us. And this, of course, from a president who did very much get involved in Gaza before, and talking about his Middle East Riviera, got involved in the war in Iran. So when he feels the time is right, he does intervene. But for some reason now, he is saying, no, it's up to Israel.
Lise, thank you so much for that analysis. Another additional line that is just coming in that's being reported by Reuters, that Benjamin Netanyahu telling the German Chancellor Israel's goal is not to take over Gaza, but free Gaza from Hamas and enable a peaceful government to be established there. But you heard the analysis there from Lise Doucet about all of those questions that flow on in the further future. Let's speak now live to our Middle East correspondent in Jerusalem, Emir Nader, and our political correspondent in Westminster, David Cornock. Emir, to you, first of all, I suppose what we don't know as we're talking now is when this new military offensive actually begins.
We don't know that. We understand that the plan will take a couple of months to see through, that reflecting the sort of vast efforts that be required to forcibly displace half of Gaza's Palestinians from that area around Gaza City and move them south. Now, the Israeli plan is saying that they will do this with humanitarian aid as part of the process, that it will take time to do it. But clearly this could add, untold humanitarian suffering onto those 1 million Palestinians around that area, and would be extremely difficult given that the area that they're told they're going to be moved to in the south of the Gaza Strip is already packed, it's already full of people, hundreds of thousands of people living in tents in the south. So it's fraught with difficulty. It could bring a lot of suffering into an area for a population that are already struggling with starvation and indeed relentless bombing. Gaza City, we must remember, yes, it hasn't been invaded by land by the Israeli military, but it has been, much of it is in ruins. It's been the target of much Israeli military activity throughout the war.
And the families of the hostages, as we've been reporting, distraught at the developments over the last 24 hours.
That's right. We've seen more protests today. They are saying the same thing, which is this proposal, this plan is essentially a death sentence for their relatives who remain captive in Gaza. There are an estimated 20 still alive of the 50 Israeli hostages still in the Gaza Strip. And it's been something that was said, we've been discussing how this rift, this dispute between the military leadership and the political leadership sort of came out into public this week, with the safety of the hostages, the fate of the hostages as one of the elements discussed. We now understand from Israeli media that the military is trying to find ways to protect the safety of the hostages, and they're also issuing statements. The military chief of staff, who sort of has been the face of the dispute with Prime Minister Netanyahu over this plan, has now issued a statement saying that the military will carry out this proposal. So they're seeking to, assert that there is unity amongst the political and military leadership after a week in which that dispute did indeed erupt into public.
Emir, thanks very much. Let's head to Westminster and to David. David, I was just reading out the latest from the German government, but from the UK government and Keir Starmer, another statement of condemnation. But is there anything linked to that in terms of concrete action?
It looks very much from the statement as if the action is more continued international diplomacy. It was an unusually strongly worded statement from Keir Starmer, and it was issued pretty promptly after we became aware of the Israeli government's decision, a decision that Keir Starmer has said that he wants Israel to reconsider immediately. He argues that the decision will do nothing to bring an end to the conflict or to secure the release of the hostages. As for what the UK can do next, he talks about, together with our allies, working on a long-term plan. But as I think you pointed out to Lise earlier, it's debatable how much influence the UK has, given that Donald Trump seems to be the only world leader that the Israeli government seems to want to listen to.
A twin thought. Why is it that the government is not sanctioning Benjamin Netanyahu, given that they've sanctioned other cabinet members? And in terms of recognising Palestine as a state, they've talked about a circumstance in September. Why, given what we're seeing on the ground now, is that decision not being brought forward?
I think on the first issue of sanctions, the two ministers who were sanctioned recently were sanctioned for specific reasons, for, as the UK saw it, inciting violence against Palestinian communities and human rights. And it would be a massive step, wouldn't it, to go from that to actually sanctioning the head of government of supposedly an ally, a democratic ally in Israel. In terms of recognition, well, we've heard from Keir Starmer say that if Israel does not step back, then the UK will follow France and recognise a Palestinian state in September. But he was criticised from both sides of the political divide on that, from people who thought that Israel should, the future of a Palestinian state should not be dependent on Israeli actions, and from others who thought that he was giving Hamas effectively a free pass because there were not the same conditions imposed on Hamas. The UK government, of course, would say the hostages should be returned and that there is no space to negotiate with terrorists. So you can see the delicate bind that Keir Starmer faces. He thought he was coming up with a significant change in UK foreign policy, but he was criticised from both sides of the divide on that, and that may explain why we expect that decision with conditions still to go ahead in September.
David there at Westminster, thank you, and thanks to Emir in Jerusalem. Well, a little earlier on the programme, I talked to Yotam Vilk, who's a former Israel Defence Forces combat officer who served in Gaza in this war. He then refused to go back, and I asked him if he was seeing more IDF soldiers and reservists doing the same thing.
Definitely. You could see the amount of people actually going back is smaller than it was, and it's still becoming smaller. We are a group of at least we're now near 400 Israeli soldiers who are willing to speak out publicly, which we all know how difficult that is during this state of war, during this complicated state of war, to publicly speak out and be critical towards the actions pushed through by the Israeli government and its policy in Gaza. I have a lot of friends feeling this aniva towards continue and serving when we the policy of this and the aim of this war is in the good. If I'm generous, it's vague. It's very clear that the Israeli government does not have a plan forward, which is not what the right-wing Messiah populist wants, which is, they speak about it very publicly, ethnic cleanse Gaza and resettle in it, which that was very much promised to us, not the goal of this war. It's promised to us.
That was Yotam Vilk talking to me earlier. Where, though, does this Israeli plan leave the humanitarian efforts on the ground? The aid agency MSF was on the programme this time yesterday, warning that the apocalyptic situation on the ground would only get immeasurably worse if the plan was to go ahead. Well, earlier I spoke to an American doctor, Mark Brana, who's recently returned from the Nasser hospital in Gaza. He described for me the impact of what he was seeing with extreme malnutrition.
These children already have experienced multi-trauma. And what is even worse is that it is so pervasive in how it affects the physiology that they start to lose emotional contact even with their families. So they become delirious. They have hallucinations. They are unable to sleep. They get zero REM. They essentially become almost like zombies. They stop playing. They stop talking. They stop looking for love. They lose contact completely with their family. And it's really an incredible insult to injury. But, you know, it starts with the brain and starts to kind of goes down. But in the most severe forms, especially in children that are less than 6 months of age, you start to get an obliteration of the immune system because people don't really start to develop a fully robust immune system until approximately 6 months of age. And so what happens is that they start getting infections of every type that you can imagine, skin infections, because everybody has cuts and scrapes. The body starts having severe protein and carbohydrate malnutrition and loss, where there's not enough protein circulating in the blood to keep the water in the bloodstream. So the water goes to area of least resistance, which is the gut. So the gut becomes very distended. And then what happens there is that the gut lining starts to auto-digest. And then the bacteria, the E. coli that are in the gut, start to translocate or move across the barrier from inside the gut into the bloodstream. And then you have what's called gram-negative sepsis, which is a systemic infection that is pretty much 100% lethal.
Well, that was just one American doctor recently out of Gaza, just describing the levels of starvation and the impact it was having, which he said had gone beyond a point, the tipping point, the point of no return. Around the world and across the UK, you're watching BBC News. Welcome back. Now, Donald Trump's deadline for Russia to agree to a ceasefire in Ukraine or face more sweeping sanctions is due to expire today. The Kremlin said yesterday that Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin would hold a summit in the coming days. Well, I've been talking to the former Ukrainian president, Petro Poroshenko, who was sceptical Putin was serious. He told me the three things he thinks should happen if a ceasefire wasn't agreed.
Ukraine is a nation who wants the most peace, but Trump promised that if Putin do not accept the condition which United States, together with Ukraine, together with European Union, together with Great Britain, introduced to Putin, it should be Plan B. Plan B means more weapons to Ukrainian armed forces, because only Ukrainian armed forces is the best diplomat who stop Putin.
Can I just interrupt you before you go on, because do I understand you correctly that at the end of today, unless Vladimir Putin has agreed to a ceasefire, you think that the US president should impose those sanctions now, in terms of all that list that you were just describing?
Three things: weapons; second, sanction from the hell; third, new financial support of Ukraine.
Former Ukrainian president, one more story. An MP has said he makes no apology for mistaking a team of charity rowers for a boatload of illegal migrants. Yunus Muller has the story.
A sight of the Norfolk coast that was a cause for alarm for the local MP. Dinghies coming into Great Yarmouth right now, wrote Rupert Lowe, the Reform MP now sitting as an independent. If these are illegal immigrants, he said, I will be using every tool at my disposal to ensure these individuals are deported. But on board were a team of 4 attempting to go from Land's End to John O'Groats to raise money for motor neuron disease. This is what the Coast Guard said.
I wonder if you can help me. We've had reports of an orange dinghy bouncing around in the waves there. We're just wondering if you've seen it.
The group include former Royal Marines such as Mike Bates, a British record holder for rowing across the Atlantic solo.
My initial instinct was, is there a dinghy in the water? Is there someone that we need to help? That's your first instinct, right? Because is it a child who's been blown offshore?
But it soon became obvious they had been mistaken for a migrant boat.
You're looking for light relief in these situations. It was very much, that's absolutely ridiculous. How can somebody have got the wrong, not just the wrong end of the stick, but the wrong stick? And bearing in mind at the same time, the crowd is building on the shore, it's getting dark, and they've all got torches. So it was a little bit like the swamp scene from Shrek, where the vigilantes have come to get rid of the ogre from the swamp.
So on our way to Beachy Head, Seven Sisters.
The journey is the first of 4 challenges to raise £57 million for MND. They originally started from Land's End on July the 25th and initially headed north into the Irish Sea, but because of bad weather returned to start again, but this time heading in the other direction.
My job for all of my adult life was to keep our country safe. So the idea that I'm a stowaway migrant, it couldn't be further from the truth.
There's going to be things that happen that we don't expect, but on the things that you don't expect spectrum, this couldn't be any further away from normal sort of things that happen.
Rupert Lowe has acknowledged his error and promised to donate £1,000 to the rowers' charity, but said he makes no apology for being vigilant. The rowing team will continue their journey to make a real difference to MND. Eunice Muller, BBC News.
An extraordinary story. You are right up to date here on BBC News.